Hi, everybody. This is Steve Saplidowski, publisher of BuyUBuzz.com. Today, Eric Asher and I are going to be talking the New Orleans Saints versus the Minnesota Vikings. We have a big game coming up this Sunday, and I think all of us are very excited. Good afternoon, Eric. How you doing today?
Doing fine, Steve. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you so much. Listen, I was so impressed with the information that you provided to us last week. You brought us good luck in terms of Carolina and the Saints, and your analysis I thought was spot on.
Thank you.
So it's my pleasure to have you on again to what I'm calling Saints Stream, meaning we're streaming about the Saints on Facebook in three different locations on Facebook, on Twitter, YouTube, Periscope, and shortly on LinkedIn. So we have a big game coming up. Your take at this point? I know we have a long way to go.
Right. Well, it's much like last week. I don't think much has changed. First of all, again, a great win for the Saints against Carolina last week. Going into this game, playing a team, a division team, three times, even though the statistics will show that it's you can beat 60% of the time. You can beat that opposing team three times. It was a difficult proposition against a very, very good Carolina defense and Cam Newton, who again they were able to contain. It's a very similar situation this week, but you step up in class. The Minnesota Vikings are a very, very good football team. They are division champions for a reason, and they got the first round bye for a reason. And one of the things that you have to look for going into this game is similar to what we saw last week. Saints have to win at the line of scrimmage on both offense and defense. They have to limit, if not again, eliminate all turnovers. And for this week, because they did have a chance to be able to play last week, where again, a lot of players that have never had an opportunity to be able to play in an NFL playoff game, it kind of bodes in their favor for them to again at least have one under their belt. They're going into U.S. Bank Stadium with again at least an opportunity to play a playoff game. And I think that bodes well for the Saints to again to get the kinks out and also to not have that awe of playing in the playoffs for the first time. But with that said, you're going on the road. You're going on the road in a very, very difficult place to play. It mirrors what we hear in the Superdome in terms of, again, the loudness of the stadium, the ferocity of the fans. And, oh, by the way, you're stepping up in class in terms of a football team. The Minnesota Vikings are a very, very good football team on both sides of the ball, but exceptional on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, they're number two in terms of their passing defense. Am I correct?
Yes, and let me tell you something. Across the board, they are one of the best teams against the run, against the pass. They create turnovers. When you just look at the defensive side of the ball, there are 6 to 7. You can even say 8 players that are among the best at their position. One again, at least at every level of defense, all three levels of defense, they have players that are considered some of the best at their position. That's why it's going to be a very, very difficult task for the Saints this week. And then on the flip side, just the injuries that they've suffered on defense, at some point, just logically, you would think that would catch up with them. They've been able to mask those injuries thus far. It'll be interesting to see if they'll be able to do that against a Minnesota team in a very, very difficult place to play.
So, injury-wise, why don't you tell us what the Saints are looking at for themselves?
Well, one of the big injuries that you have to worry about is Andres Pete going out. He came in as a number one pick as a tackle. Really didn't play well in that tackle position. Look, he just doesn't have the feet to play a left tackle position in the NFL, and he's not really comfortable on the right side of the line. The Saints found a niche for this guy, putting him in at the left guard position in between Max Unger and Teron Armstead, two of the best at their position in the NFL. And the guy has excelled. He is a dynamite run blocker. He is great in terms of the screen game, also being able to get out on the swing pass, also being able to, again, the second level blocking that he does within the running game. He's a big, massive guy. I mean, a massive guy. So, again, he was tough to move. And when you talk about the strength of that defensive line, the interior of the defensive line for the Minnesota Vikings, he's going to be missed. Now, Senio Kelemete has played exceptional this season. He's been able to have to play multiple positions for the Saints all along that offensive line. Everywhere he's been asked to play, he's played. Look, in the first game meeting against these teams, he had to go out and play the tackle position, which is an unfamiliar position for him. And he's going to be now at that left guard position. Here's the deal. There's not much behind them. You've got Jocelyn Revis, and then you're bringing in guys off the street that will have to be able to come in and play if you have another injury. Teron Armstead has been injured all season long, in and out the lineup. He's a guy that, much like we talked about last week, has played injured. He's played through injuries consistently. He's going to have to stay on the field. The Saints cannot afford any more injuries. I'm saying any more injuries on the offensive line. Defensively, it's the same situation. Last week, McDaniel, defensive tackle, a guy that was brought in off the street who was in training camp with the Saints. He comes in. Tony McDaniel plays the first half, injured while his wife is allegedly going into labor, getting ready to have a child. He's out. They have to bring in another guy off the street to be able to come in and play that position. They're just getting very, very thin on the defensive side of the ball. So again, when you look at 20 players that are now on injury reserve that have either started for this team or played a prominent role on this team, with I believe it's 8 or so of those players that are just on the 11 players that are just on the defensive side of the ball. That's a lot of injuries for one team, and a team that we've talked about on this show in the past, that is really 1 year away. They're really 1 year away from having quality depth, and that means, again, another great draft, another free agency period where you land some players that can help you immediately, and of course the players that have had a chance to play over the last 2 seasons, getting that NFL experience. So they're really 1 more year away of that, from having that depth. So give a lot of credit to Terry Fontenot in the front office, who handles pro personnel. And of course, you can't forget Jeff Ireland, who has done a great job in restocking this team in the draft. It's been amazing what they've been able to do to be able to overcome injuries. But again, logically, you would say at some point it's going to catch up with you, because you can't keep bringing players off the street and asking them to play in tough circumstances and to be able to perform, especially in enemy territory, going into a dome where, again, you're not going to be able to hear the signals, and you can be prone to making mistakes and having bust.
So on the Minnesota Vikings side, what's their injury situation like? I know that in particular, they've had a longer period of time to rest.
Well, they've had a week to rest. Again, that can play in their favor and against them, as I mentioned as we opened up the segment today. They've had to sit down and watch for a week. They have players on that team that have never had an opportunity to be in the playoffs, including Case Keenum, their quarterback. So again, they've got to get the jitters out. They've got to get the kinks out, and that plays into the Saints' favor. Injury wise, it's pretty amazing. They're fairly healthy at this point. They've got a few players that they've lost early. Dalvin Cook was a running back that started this year in the beginning of the season at running back, but then now they're running back by committee. Ultimately, you look at Sam Bradford, who started the season as the quarterback, but Case Keenum has won 11 games for this team this year. So they're not even close to the Saints in terms of the walking wounded.
Right, right, right. So were you satisfied with the Saints offense last week?
I thought it was one of the best games that I've ever seen Sean Payton call, maybe since the Super Bowl season. The Carolina Panthers, and I think this will be mimicked by the Minnesota Vikings this weekend. They were dead set on taking Kamara and Ingram out the game, stopping the screen pass, stopping the run. They're Kuechly and Davis, they're 2 fine linebackers, run blitzed. They keyed on the running game. They tried to stop the running game. And, again, Peyton realized this. And, by the middle of the first quarter, realized he had to tear up the play sheet, and he was going to have to beat them through the air. The Saints used a lot of play action passes. They again used the aggressiveness of the Carolina Panthers in stopping the running game against them. Ted Ginn Jr. with, again, the big hit early for the touchdown, and then again going to 8 different receivers and allowing them to be able to, again, move the sticks for the Saints. It was a great game plan and an aggressive game plan on the part of both Sean Payton and Dennis Allen. When you look at, again, how they approach the Carolina game, I think they're going to be very, very similar this week. They're going to be very aggressive. They're going to go after this thing. And, there's a fine line between aggressiveness and recklessness. This all played well in the Saints' favor last week with, again, some of the calls that Sean Payton made, the 57-yard field goal where maybe you want to punt and maybe have Carolina deep in their own territory and have to go the length of the field to score. Again, late in the game, the 4th and 2, going for that play, the interception that was not dropped by Michael Adams, the safety. He catches the football, which again played right into the Saints' hands. It was really a glorified punt. And then, of course, the final play against Cam Newton when Dennis Allen blitzed Von Bell, and of course Cam Jordan came in and cleaned up the sack. I mean, these were very, very aggressive plays on the part of the Saints coaches, and I fully expect them to be in that mode again this week against the Minnesota Vikings.
Now, the one call that I just didn't understand was when Peyton decided to go for the fourth down in the fourth quarter.
Well, and again, I think the safe coach would have punted the ball. They tried to get the Panthers to jump off sides. They weren't budging, but that was Peyton's feeling going into this. I'm going to leave it all on the field, and I'm going to live and die with aggressiveness. And this time it played into his favor. Look, we would have been talking about a whole different scenario if it would have backfired on Peyton on Monday. You're aggressive. You get patted on the back for the aggressiveness when it works. When it doesn't work, you looked as reckless and you lost the game because you didn't play it, as the numbers would have you play it.
Sure.
I like the aggressive call, even though, again, on social media, I put out, I probably wouldn't have done that. I probably would have gone the more conservative route. But again, I understand where he's at. And look, the players have bought into this as well. They're aggressive. They want to be aggressive. They're a physical, aggressive team right now. And I think it plays into the vibe that you're getting out of Saints camp right now.
Just out of curiosity, doesn't it give the impression that he doesn't have enough trust and faith in his defense? I mean, he could have gotten 90 yards away from pay dirt, ended up being 50 yards or so.
I think it had to do a lot with, again, the health of the defense and also, again, the injuries as well as just being tired and just him being aggressive. Look, he's an aggressive coach. He's always been an aggressive coach.
Mm-hmm.
He's a guy that doesn't mind gambling, and especially in the biggest games. Come on. Think back to, again, the onside kick in the Super Bowl. I mean, how many coaches have the cojones to do that? And that's always been the MO of Sean Payton. When Sean Payton is on, he is an aggressive coach, whether it's offensive play calling or, again, just the total aggressiveness in terms of, again, how he sets up his game plan, how he plays it on game day. Look, I like the aggressive Sean Payton. Again, I can be critical of him because, again, sometimes you want to play it conservative, but I do like the aggressive Sean Payton, and I think that the team feeds off of that.
Sure. Now, if anybody has a question, please go ahead and post your question. We'll be glad to pose it to Eric Asher. And again, this is Steve Sabludowski, publisher by ebuzz.com. We're streaming right into Facebook, into 3 different locations on Facebook, into Twitter, Periscope, YouTube. So we're really pleased to talk about the Saints in the playoff game. Why did the Saints have to play Minnesota? I thought they really ought to be playing the Falcons. I mean, I don't understand the scheduling.
Well, Steve, it's the way it's set up in the NFL in terms of seeding, and of course, again, going into it, you realize, what seed will play what seed if a certain team wins. Atlanta's the 6th seed; they're the lowest seed, so they're going to play the highest seed that's left in the playoffs. So they'll be traveling to Philadelphia. The Saints are the 4th seed, and of course, the second highest remaining seed left is the 2nd seed, which is the Minnesota Vikings. So that's the ultimate. That's
okay.
How this plays out in this round robin tournament.
Okay, I thought that the two worst teams, say 4 and 6 or 5 and 6, would play one another. But
yeah, in most tournaments like this, it's the lower seed playing the higher seed going forward, and that's how it was last week. That's how it is this week. And of course, then the next seeding will be home field advantage for the NFC Championship. The team with the higher seed will have the home field advantage ultimately, whether that's going to be Philadelphia, Minnesota, or New Orleans. Atlanta has no chance of hosting.
Right. So the best case scenario for the Saints would be a Falcon win and a Saint win in order to.
Well, that's what most people are saying. Look, The Saints are a much better team in the dome. At the end of the day, when you're going to break this thing down, you would say, yeah, probably the best thing for the Saints is to be in the dome for the NFC Championship. Uh, Again, Peyton and Breeze are undefeated in the dome. Uh, the only drawback to that, as we discussed last week against Carolina, you're playing the Atlanta Falcons for 3 times now in one season if that happens. Atlanta is a veteran team that has been to a Super Bowl. They're 1 year removed from the Super Bowl, and they know the Saints very, very intimately, as the Saints know the Falcons. Again, that would be a very, very tough proposition for the Saints. It would be just as difficult to have to go into, again, inclement weather or cold weather in Philadelphia if ultimately you had to go and take on the Eagles. So I guess, the homer in you would say, hey, I'll take my shots with the Atlanta Falcons in the dome. But a lot of experts are saying that this Atlanta Falcon team is playing very, very well right now, and because of the experience that they had in being in the Super Bowl last year, that they have the opportunity if the Saints and Falcons meet to be able to win in the dome. It'll be an interesting scenario. I can tell you this right now. I know we've all relished in the fact of the 28-3 debacle that was last year's Super Bowl with the Falcons and the Patriots, and we've made fun of it. We've dealt with it on social media. It would be a horrible heartbreak for this city, for the Saints organization, for the Saints fans everywhere, if ultimately you get to the NFC Championship and to have to lose to the hated Falcons. So, look, I've got faith if ultimately this thing comes back to New Orleans with Sean Payton and his ability to get this team ready. But you know what? There's no overlooking the Minnesota Vikings. You got to take care of business this week.
So, what is it that really makes Drew Brees great? I mean, is it his patience, his vision, the his fakery? Uh, I mean, the game, it was really a remarkable game. That play where he rolled out to his right and threw on a run like that under
Well, I
pressure.
think there are a few things. I think first off the field, his preparation. Nobody prepares harder. He's a guy that understands all the nuances, everything that again is part of this particular scheme. Sean Payton and him have been together long enough that again there's a kinship there, where again both guys are thinking along the same lines. And then of course there is the physical standpoint of not just the preparation of being the most prepared guy on the field, understanding, what the other team's going to do, understanding what you have to do to win, but his accuracy, number one. He is one of the more accurate quarterbacks in the history of the game. The statistics will tell you he's the most accurate quarterback in the history of the game. His ability to be able to throw the ball accurately, his ability to be able to, again, from a mechanic standpoint, always, again, have his feet set and letting the football go. Pre-snap reads, understanding what he's seeing with the defense before the ball is snapped, the ability to get in and out of plays quickly and to be able to get the team ready to go if ultimately he sees something that he doesn't like on the play that's called. And then the ability to be able to manipulate the defense with his eyes. He does that so well, manipulate the safety, the linebackers, so that, again, he opens up lanes to be able to throw the football. And of course, again, his ball handling ability, the way he handles the ball, in ultimately, again, duping the defense into believing one thing and doing the other. He's the complete quarterback. And he's the reason why this franchise went from one of the worst franchises in the history of the NFL to again, up to this point, with throw out the 7 and 9 for the last 4 to 5 years when you can't throw that on Breeze. He's still been one of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of the game. He's the reason why this particular franchise has turned around. He's a once in a generation quarterback. He's been able to overcome his lack of size. And again, it's amazing and just a godsend for an organization that has been perennial losers to get a player like Breeze. And then for the city, as you know, Steve, coming back from the largest man-made disaster in the history of this country, aka Hurricane Katrina, the city on its knees, the possibility of this franchise being moved to San Antonio, and the fan base really coming together, selling out the dome, sellout since 2006, and to have this guy come in and to be the anchor of this team going forward, not just the face of the franchise on the field, but again, the face of the city off the field. Again, there's an MVP out there. It's Drew Brees, not just for what he's done on the field and carrying this team, but how he's carried this city as well.
I wonder whether the Vikings emotionally are going to be, say, higher than the Saints. One, because they're in their dome. Secondly, is because the Saints beat them in the playoff game, or in the playoff, the championship game back in 2009. And lastly, because of the fact that the Super Bowl is up there. I mean, this is sort of an inspirational aspect of a game, especially football.
Well, the fans remember 2009. The players could care less. There's one player left on that team from the 2009 season. Most of those players are gone. That's ancient history as far as that goes. New team, new season. They're going to be emotionally up. How can you not be emotionally up? It's the playoffs. It's one and done. You win or you go home. I don't think the players care much about the Super Bowl being in Minnesota. That's all about the fans. That's all about the media. I think they're going to be physically and mentally ready to play. They know they have a challenge. I don't think that they're much worried about the game one in which the Saints lost to the Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota, because these are two different teams than they were in week one. So again, look, they'll be up, they'll be ready to go. I'm sure that Mike Zimmer, who's one of the better coaches in the NFL, will have this team prepared to go. It's going to come down to the team that makes the most and that makes the least mistakes. If ultimately the Saints are not turning the ball over, if they can get an early lead, then they have a chance to be able to come out with a win and then either travel to Philadelphia or have the NFC Championship here in New Orleans. If ultimately they're not able to get the plays off, they're having bust and mistakes because of the crowd noise. If they have a case of nerves because they're on the road for the first time in the playoffs for a lot of these players, and they start making again unforced errors and mistakes, well, the Saints going to be a long day, and the Saints are going to lose the game. But I think this is going to be a very, very close game. And again, the only reason why I give the edge to the Vikings is because of the injuries on the Saints defense. Look, much like I said last week, if you look at this team in the 8-game winning streak and how this defense was playing with pretty much their full complement of players on the defensive side of the ball, you give me that team during that time and you put that team against Carolina, Philadelphia, Atlanta, or Minnesota this weekend, I'm taking the Saints all day long. It's been remarkable how they've been able to overcome these injuries.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, again, unlikely that they can continue to play as well as they've played these last few weeks with so many individuals that again have not been with this team a full season.
You said there were 20 players on injured reserve. Is that?
20 players on injury reserve.
Oh my
I
God.
mean, that's almost another team. I mean,
Yeah.
literally. There's 22 starters on a team. That literally, that's almost another starting team on injury reserve.
Tell us about the Viking quarterback.
Well, Case Keenum was a guy that played at the University of Houston, broke a lot of records. But again, he was a guy that never played under center. He played in the shotgun a lot, and a lot of scouts really wondered if he had what it took to be able to play in the NFL because he had never really played under center. He's a guy that, much like Drew Brees, kind of smallish, a 6 footer, a guy that has been underestimated throughout his career. And he has come in and taken command of that Minnesota Vikings offense. Look, the guy's won 11 games in the NFL. You don't do that by accident. He has the ability to be able to move and throw on the run. He's a guy that when he makes a mistake, he shakes it off. He doesn't really like he has that almost that cornerback mentality. Throw an interception, no problem. Let's come back. We'll get it on the net. We'll get it on the next play. And he's been able to guide that offense for the Minnesota Vikings. Look, they got Teddy Bridgewater, who was their first round pick.
Mm-hmm.
Sam Bradford is a guy that they brought in, and neither one of those guys have been able to get back on the field because Keenum's been playing so well. Now, there's an X factor here. He's played well. The playoffs are a totally different game. The speed of the game is quicker. Obviously, you have to make quicker decisions. Turnovers, mistakes are magnified within the playoffs because it's a win and go home scenario. There are no go back and work on some of the problems that you had on film, and we'll get it right next week. You only have this week if you lose. So again, this is a situation where it'll be interesting to see how Case Keenum handles again the spotlight against again a Saints team that is kind of limping into this game on the defensive side of the ball, but limping in, but again have played well above their heads over the last few weeks.
Sure. Let's see. One last question, if I might, and that is, why don't you give us a prediction? I know it's dangerous to do, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, I said it last week, and look, I'm a lifelong New Orleanian. Okay, I love the Saints. Again, it's hard for me to be able to, to say, and it's really reluctantly, I think the Vikings will win. Home field advantage, the injuries on Saints defense. If the Saints were healthy on defense, I would be picking the Saints to win this game. I just think it's very difficult to overcome the type of injuries in a very hostile environment. Look, the Saints are going to have to overcome the noise in the dome. They're going to have to be able to get their checks, the changes on the fly, whether it's on offense or defense. Offensively, they should be able to handle that because for the most part, everyone is intact on the offensive side of the ball, with the exception of Senio Kelementi. But he's played so much this year, he's almost like a quasi starter. On defense, you've got so many players that are playing maybe second, third week with this team and will be playing prominent roles. And when you have to make changes on the fly, are they going to be able to know their assignments and be, again, error-free football in terms of their assignments? Physically, again, it's going to be very, very difficult for the Saints' offensive line, as good as they've been. And look, I think they are the best offensive line in football this year. But that defensive line for the Minnesota Vikings is exceptional. From again the ability to be able to stop the run on the inside and to be able to push the pocket back on the interior of the defensive line to again the speed rushers on the outside, the ability to match up one-on-one on the outside with their cornerbacks, and oh by the way, multiple linebackers that not only can stuff the run, but again can be able to handle themselves in the passing game. They are a dynamite defense, one of the best defenses in the NFL, and that means you got to play error-free football to be able to win. So reluctantly, I'm picking the Vikings, but I'm picking them in a close game.
Oh boy,
But I
that's
picked
a.
Carolina last week.
No,
So
I know.
again,
Yeah.
I mean, again, look, the Saints come out and
I
play
asked you,
well.
and I,
They have a
yeah.
chance. They have a chance to win the game.
No, look,
But I'm
I think
talking
you.
with my head, not my
Yeah.
heart here.
No, of course. And you gave us very cogent reasons too. No question about it. I think everybody is definitely concerned. The injuries, I mean, for sure, definitely play a major role. Eric Asher, listen, thank you so much again. I really appreciate you being with us on Saints Stream, and hopefully we'll be back next week with the Saints going all the way to the NFC Championship game. I really appreciate you taking your time on this Friday afternoon.
Steve, I appreciate it. I want to remind everybody you can catch me on the radio,
Sure.
Sports 1280, also 101.1 FM HD2. You can listen live, download the podcast at ericasher.com, sports1280.com. You can download the iHeartRadio app, which is a free download for your smartphone or tablet, the keyword sports1280 or Eric Asher. And of course, follow me on Twitter at Eric_Asher. And if you're in the New Orleans area or in South Louisiana, catch my TV show, the award-winning Inside New Orleans Sports, Friday night on WLAE TV at 6 o'clock. That's our live broadcast. 10 o'clock on Cox 130. 9 o'clock on Pelican Sports Television on Friday nights, 10 o'clock on WLAE. And if you're up at 2 a.m. in the morning, a little insomnia, catch us on Cox 130. That's where you catch the award-winning Inside New Orleans Sports. And if you missed it or you're out of town and you'd like to check out the show, go to ericasher.com. You can catch all the previous episodes. This week, Mike Detillier is my guest, NFL college football analyst. And of course, we had a great show last night. Steve,
Sure.
thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure being with you. And thanks to all that tuned in today.
Listen, thank you again. And hold on one second. I'm going to push a couple buttons and knock everybody off.
Thank you.
So hold on one second, please.